Greasy hands and unpaid bills were Dallas's entire reality until a sobbing teenager in a crippled Porsche swerved into his life at midnight. What started as a simple tire change plunged a desperate single father into a dangerous, high-stakes conspiracy involving one of the country's most ruthless tech billionaires. Grease stained the deep lines of Dallas Miller's face, a permanent tattoo earned through 15 years of turning wrenches in South Chicago. At 38, he was a man running on fumes, sustained only by the thought of his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, sleeping soundly in the small apartment above his struggling auto shop. He was elbow-deep in the transmission of a beat-up Honda Civic, the harsh glare of the halogen work light casting long, tired shadows across the concrete floor. The clock on the wall hummed past 1 in the morning. He needed this job finished tonight to afford Emily's asthma medication by tomorrow. The silence of the desolate street was suddenly shattered by the agonizing screech of metal grinding against asphalt. Dallas dropped his wrench, wiping his hands on a filthy rag as he stepped out from the garage bay. A silver Porsche Panamera, a vehicle that had absolutely no business being in this part of town, limped onto his gravel lot. Sparks flew from the front right wheel. The tire wasn't just flat, it was completely shredded, the expensive custom rim chewing itself to pieces on the stones. The car shuddered to a halt beneath the flickering neon sign of Miller's Auto. The driver's side door flew open, and a teenage girl practically fell out onto the pavement. She couldn't have been older than 17. She was dressed in what looked like a custom evening gown, now stained with engine grease and dirt, her high heels discarded in the footwell. But it was her face that made Dallas freeze. Her makeup was ruined by a river of tears, her chest heaving with violent, uncontrollable sobs. She was clutching her phone to her chest like a lifeline, looking wildly over her shoulder toward the dark, empty street behind her. Hey kid, Dallas called out softly, keeping his hands visible and his voice low, the same tone he used when Emily woke up from a nightmare. You're okay. You're safe here. The girl flinched, backing up against the expensive paintwork of the ruined car. You have to help me, she stammered, her voice cracking. He's coming. I know he's coming. Dallas didn't ask questions. Survival instincts, honed by years in a rough neighborhood, kicked in. He stepped forward, grabbed the heavy iron gate of the shop's perimeter, and slammed it shut, throwing the deadbolt. He ushered the trembling girl inside the main garage and pulled down the corrugated metal door, sealing them in. Come into the office, Dallas instructed, guiding her toward the small, glass-enclosed room at the back. He grabbed a bottle of water from the mini-fridge and handed it to her. Drink this. Try to breathe. I'm Dallas. What's your name? Chloe, she whispered, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the plastic bottle. Okay, Chloe, I'm going to take a look at your car. Do you want me to call the police? No, she screamed the word, her eyes widening in pure terror. No cops! Please! And you can't call my mother. They'll know where I am. You just have to fix the tire. I have to keep driving. Dallas frowned, studying her. She was terrified, but there was a sharp, underlying edge of genuine danger to her panic. All right, no cops. Stay in here. Lock the door from the inside. He walked back out to the shop floor and knelt beside the ruined front wheel of the Porsche. He jacked up the frame, the hydraulic lift hissing in the quiet garage. As he pulled off the mangled rim, he examined the remnants of the rubber tire. Dallas had seen blowouts from potholes, dry rot, and overinflation. This was none of those. He ran his callous thumb along the edge of the tear. It was a perfectly straight, surgical slice right through the reinforced sidewall. Someone had deliberately taken a titanium blade to the tire, cutting it just deep enough so that it would hold air at a standstill, but catastrophically fail the moment the car hit highway speeds. Someone hadn't just vandalized Chloe's car. They had orchestrated a breakdown. They wanted her stranded in the dark. Suddenly, the roar of a high-powered engine echoed from the street outside. Dallas killed the garage lights instantly, plunging the shop into darkness. He crept toward the dirty window overlooking the street. A matte black SUV was crawling past his shop, its headlights off. It paused right outside his heavy iron gate, idling with a low, menacing growl. The tinted windows rolled down an inch, and Dallas could see the faint red glow of a cigarette being dragged. He held his breath, his hand instinctively gripping a heavy steel lug wrench. For 30 agonizing seconds, the SUV sat there. Finally, the engine revved and the vehicle peeled away into the night. Dallas let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He moved quickly now. He grabbed a spare, universal donut tire he kept for emergencies. It wouldn't fit a Porsche perfectly, but it would bolt on and get her moving. He worked with practiced speed, torquing the lug nuts in the dark. He knocked on the office door. Chloe unlocked it, her face pale in the dim light. "I put a spare on," Dallas said firmly. "It's ugly and you can't go over 40 miles an hour. But it will get you to a populated area. Someone intentionally slashed your tire, Chloe. Whoever they are, they just drove past my shop looking for you." Chloe choked back a sob covering her mouth. "I'm going to follow you," Dallas told her, his paternal instincts completely overriding his need to finish his paying job. "I've got a beat-up Ford truck. I'll stay right on your bumper until you're safely downtown where there are cameras and crowds. Do you understand?" She nodded numbly, digging into a small designer clutch. She pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills, thrusting them toward him. "Take this, please." Dallas looked at the money, more cash than he made in a month, and pushed her hand gently away. "Keep it. You might need it. Just get in the car." 10 minutes later, the iron gates opened, and the crippled Porsche rolled out. Dallas's rusty Ford F-150 glued to its rear bumper. He escorted her all the way to the brightly lit, bustling perimeter of the downtown district. Only when she merged onto a busy avenue, surrounded by late-night taxis and streetlights, did Dallas flash his brights, honk once, and turn back toward the gritty safety of his own neighborhood. He thought the drama was over. He had no idea the nightmare hadn't even begun. Sunlight sliced through the grimy windows of Miller's auto, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Dallas was exhausted. He had returned to the shop at 3 in the morning, finished the Honda's transmission, and grabbed barely 2 hours of sleep on the lumpy cot in his office. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the heavy rotary phone on his desk began to ring. It was an obnoxious, shrill sound. Dallas groaned, rubbing his face as he reached for the receiver. "Miller's auto," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Am I speaking to Dallas Miller?" The voice on the other end was female, perfectly modulated, chillingly calm, and carried an unmistakable tone of absolute authority. It wasn't a question, it was a demand for confirmation. Speaking. "What can I do for you? My name is Victoria Sterling. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Global Technologies." Dallas sat up a little straighter. Even he knew who Victoria Sterling was. Her face was on the cover of Forbes, Time, and the Wall Street Journal. She was a self-made billionaire, notorious for ruthlessly dismantling rival tech companies and maintaining an iron grip on global data infrastructure. "Okay," Dallas said cautiously. "I fix cars, miss." "Sterling, I don't know anything about computers." "Cut the folksy act, Mr. Miller." Victoria's voice dropped 10 degrees, turning sharp as cracked ice. "At 12:42 a.m. this morning, the onboard telemetry and GPS system of my daughter's Porsche Panamera registered a 46-minute stop at your exact coordinates. I want to know exactly where Chloe is, and I want to know right now." Dallas felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The crying teenager. "Your daughter is Chloe? Do not play games with me," Victoria snapped. "I have private security contractors who can dismantle your life and your pathetic little garage before the local police even finish their morning coffee. If this is a ransom situation, name your price. I will pay it, and you will walk away. If you have harmed a hair on her head—" "Listen to me very carefully, lady," Dallas interrupted, his protective anger flaring up. He didn't care how many billions she had. Nobody threatened his livelihood. "I'm a single father. I don't kidnap kids. Your daughter showed up here last night, terrified, with a shredded front tire. I put a spare on her car, refused her money, and tailed her downtown to make sure she was safe." There was a heavy, profound silence on the line. When Victoria spoke again, the icy armor had cracked, revealing a frantic, terrified mother underneath. "You saw her leave your shop? You are certain she was in the car?" "I followed her myself," Dallas insisted. "I watched her merge onto Michigan Avenue." "Why? Didn't she make it home?" "The highway patrol found her car at 6 o'clock this morning," Victoria said, her voice barely a whisper now. It was abandoned on the shoulder of Interstate 90. The engine was still running. The driver's side door was open. Her phone and her purse were left on the passenger seat. Chloe is gone. Dallas's blood ran cold. The image of the matte black SUV idling outside his gate flashed violently in his mind. "He's coming. I know he's coming. Miss Sterling," Dallas said, his voice deadly serious. Her tire didn't just blow out. It was slashed, sabotaged. Someone deliberately engineered a catastrophic failure. And while she was hiding in my office, a black SUV, no plates, heavily tinted windows, drove by my shop looking for her. A black SUV. Victoria breathed out. Dallas could hear the sound of a heavy door closing through the receiver. "Mr. Miller, did your shop happen to have security cameras?" "I have two. One facing the bay, one facing the street. They record on a rolling 2-4-hour loop to a hard drive. Do not touch that hard drive. Do not review the footage. And whatever you do not call the Chicago Police Department." Dallas frowned deeply. "Why not? Your daughter has been abducted. We need to call the cops." "The people who took my daughter have people inside the department," Victoria stated flatly. A horrifying revelation dropped casually into the conversation. "This is corporate espionage at the highest level. I am dealing with a hostile takeover by a shadow syndicate. If the police get involved, they will kill Chloe to send me a message. I am sending my personal extraction team to your garage right now. They are 10 minutes away. Lock your doors. Do not let anyone inside until my lead operative, a man named Reynolds, identifies himself." The line went dead. Dallas stood there, the receiver still pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He looked up at the ceiling, thinking of little Emily upstairs eating her cereal, completely oblivious to the fact that her father had just been drafted into a billionaire's covert war. He slammed the phone down and immediately moved toward the front of the shop to pull down the steel security shutters. Just as his hand grabbed the heavy chain to lower the door, a pair of Ford Explorer police interceptors came tearing down the street, their sirens off, but their light bars flashing a blinding red and blue. They screeched to a halt right on his gravel lot, blocking the entrance. 4 men in tactical gear and Chicago PD windbreakers piled out of the vehicles. They moved with aggressive, military precision, far too fast for standard beat cops. "Dallas Miller," the lead officer barked, resting his hand on the butt of his holstered sidearm as he marched toward the open garage bay. "Chicago Police, we need to secure your premises and confiscate your security hard drives immediately." Dallas froze. He remembered Victoria's warning. "Do not call the police. They have people inside." He looked at the officers. Their boots were military issue, not standard police footwear. The badges on their windbreakers were completely flat, lacking the usual metallic sheen of genuine department issue. And they already knew about the hard drives. These weren't cops. The men from the black SUV had come back. Dallas did not possess the luxury of panic. The heavy steel security shutters of the garage bay were down, but the side entrance, a solid steel door with a deadbolt, was the only thing standing between him and the 4 heavily armed men claiming to be Chicago police officers. "Open up, Miller! We know you're in there," the lead man shouted, pounding a heavy fist against the metal door. The sound echoed through the cavernous, dimly lit shop like cannon fire. Dallas backed away slowly, his eyes darting around his sanctuary. He grabbed a heavy-duty pneumatic impact wrench from his workbench, the thick air hose trailing behind it like a mechanical snake. It wasn't a gun, but at close range, it could crush a man's skull. "Slip the warrant under the door," Dallas yelled back, forcing his voice to project a calm he didn't feel. "I'm calling my lawyer." "We don't have time for this," a muffled voice said from the other side. A second later, the deafening roar of a 1-2 gauge shotgun blasted through the confines of the alley. The deadbolt exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal. The heavy door kicked open. Dallas didn't hesitate. He pointed the air hose directly at the faces of the breaching men and squeezed the trigger of the impact wrench. Instead of driving a bolt, the modified tool released a blinding, high-pressure cloud of aerosolized engine degreaser and brake dust directly into the doorway. The 2 men in the front choked and stumbled backward, clawing at their burning eyes. Using the momentary distraction, Dallas sprinted for the metal staircase at the back of the shop, taking the steps two at a time. He burst into his small, cramped apartment above the garage. Emily was already sitting up in bed, her small hands clutching her teddy bear, her eyes wide with terror at the sound of the shotgun blast. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Shoes, Em." "Right now," Dallas commanded, scooping up her emergency asthma inhaler and shoving it into his pocket. He grabbed his daughter, wrapped a thick blanket around her, and moved toward the fire escape window facing the back alley. Down below, the men had recovered. Dallas could hear their heavy boots kicking over toolboxes and shattering the glass of his office walls. They were looking for the security servers. They were looking for him. "Check upstairs," a voice barked. Dallas pushed the fire escape window open, the rusted hinges shrieking in protest. The cold Chicago night air hit them instantly. He stepped out onto the metal grating, pulling Emily out beside him. Just as the apartment door behind them was kicked off its hinges, a blinding spotlight illuminated the entire back alley, turning the darkness into harsh, artificial day. Three massive, matte black SUVs, identical to the one that had stalked his shop hours ago, but heavily armored, came screaming down the narrow alleyway, blocking the exit. But these weren't the men inside the shop. The side doors of the vehicles slid open before they even came to a complete stop. A squad of men dressed in unmarked tactical gear poured out. They moved with a terrifying, silent efficiency that made the fake cops inside look like amateurs. Leading them was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar running down his jawline. He carried a suppressed submachine gun and never once took his eyes off the fire escape. This had to be Reynolds. "Miller," the scarred man shouted over the roar of the idling engines. "Get down here, now!" Inside the apartment, two of the fake cops rushed toward the open window, raising their weapons. Reynolds didn't even blink. He raised his submachine gun and fired a 3-round burst through the window frame. The glass shattered, and the men inside dove for cover. "Jump!" Reynolds commanded. Dallas didn't think. He held Emily tightly to his chest, climbed over the rusty railing, and dropped the 10 feet onto the roof of a parked dumpster, rolling to absorb the impact. Before he could even stand, two of Reynolds' men were there, dragging him and his daughter behind the armored chassis of the nearest SUV. A fierce, chaotic firefight erupted between the men inside the garage and Victoria Sterling's private extraction team. The deafening pop of suppressed gunfire mixed with the heavier blasts of the fake cops returning fire. "Get them in the vehicle." Reynolds barked, laying down suppressing fire toward the second-story window. Dallas was shoved into the plush, leather interior of the armored SUV, his hands shaking violently as he shielded Emily's face. The heavy doors slammed shut, instantly muting the gunfire outside to a dull, distant thudding. Reynolds jumped into the front passenger seat seconds later, his face entirely unreadable. "Drive," Reynolds ordered the driver. The SUV threw itself into reverse, tearing out of the alley at breakneck speed. As they sped away into the night, Dallas looked out the heavily tinted rear window. Plumes of thick black smoke were already pouring from the shattered windows of Miller's auto. His livelihood, his tools, the only home his daughter had ever known. All of it was gone. "Who were they?" Dallas demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and adrenaline as he held his crying daughter. Reynolds reloaded his weapon with mechanical precision. "Mercenaries, hired by a man named Jonathan Croft. He's the CEO of Omnicorp and Victoria Sterling's biggest rival. Croft is orchestrating a hostile takeover of Vanguard Global, and he's using Chloe as leverage to force Victoria to surrender her company's encrypted source code." "Over a computer program?" Dallas asked, incredulous. "They shot up my home over a computer program?" "It's not just a program," Reynolds replied coldly. "It's a quantum decryption algorithm capable of bypassing any financial security system on the planet. It's worth trillions, and Croft will kill everyone in his path to get it. We're taking you to the Sterling estate. You're the only civilian who has seen the men who took the girl." The Sterling estate in Winnetka was less of a home and more of a fortress. High stone walls, electrified fencing, and armed patrols completely isolated the sprawling, ultra-modern mansion from the outside world. Dallas, still covered in grease and soot, carried a sleeping Emily into the cavernous, glass-walled living room. The space had been entirely converted into a high-tech war room. Dozens of glowing monitors displaying satellite imagery, thermal scans, and lines of scrolling code dominated the space. A team of 20 exhausted-looking analysts pounded away at keyboards. Standing in the center of the chaos was Victoria Sterling. She looked nothing like the polished, untouchable billionaire from the magazine covers. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair was disheveled, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of absolute terror. She was clutching a cup of black coffee so tightly her knuckles were white. When she saw Dallas, she crossed the room instantly. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice tight. She looked at the sleeping child in his arms. "I am so incredibly sorry about your home. I will compensate you for everything. Every wrench, every bolt, but right now, I need your help." Dallas gently laid Emily on a multi-million-dollar velvet sofa, covering her with a blanket. He turned to the billionaire, his jaw set. "You said they found her car abandoned on the highway." Victoria nodded, gesturing to a large monitor displaying high-resolution police crime scene photos of the silver Porsche parked haphazardly on the shoulder of I-90. "My cyber team tracked the car's GPS telemetry until exactly 5:42 a.m. That's when the signal vanished entirely. Croft's men are professionals. They transferred Chloe into a heavily shielded Faraday van. It blocks all cellular, GPS, and radio frequencies. They've effectively vanished off the face of the earth. Croft sent a burner phone message demanding the Vanguard source code by noon today, or Chloe dies. She looked at the digital clock on the wall. It was 8:45 a.m. They had barely 3 hours. "We are blind, Mr. Miller," Victoria admitted, her voice finally breaking. "My satellites, my algorithms, my entire global surveillance network, it's all useless. They've gone completely dark." Dallas walked closer to the massive screen, ignoring the bewildered looks of the elite hackers around him. He stared intensely at the photos of the abandoned Porsche. He looked at the shattered driver's side window, the open door, the expensive purse left on the seat. Then he looked at the wheels. "Zoom in on the front right tire," Dallas ordered the nearest analyst. The young man in a designer hoodie looked at Victoria for permission. She nodded sharply. The image zoomed in, pixelating slightly before resolving into a clear view of the ugly, rusted steel donut wheel Dallas had bolted onto the luxury car just hours ago. "Where did you get that spare?" Victoria asked, confused. "I run a shop in a neighborhood where cars get stripped for parts in 10 minutes flat," Dallas said, his voice deadly calm. "I don't hand out expensive equipment." That donut tire came off a salvaged 2008 commercial delivery van from a bankrupt plumbing fleet. "I fail to see how that helps us, Mr. Miller," Reynolds interjected from the doorway, his arms crossed. "The car is here. The girl is gone." "Look closely at the valve stem," Dallas said, pointing a greasy finger at the screen. The analyst enhanced the image. The valve cap on the tire wasn't standard black plastic. It was a bulky, metallic silver cylinder. "That is a commercial, active RFID tracking valve," Dallas explained. "The plumbing company installed them on their entire fleet a decade ago to track mileage and ensure their drivers weren't taking unauthorized detours. It doesn't use GPS. It doesn't use cellular networks. It's an analog, low-frequency VHF radio transmitter. It pings localized toll booth scanners and way stations on a 433 megahertz frequency." The war room went dead silent. "When I put that spare on, I noticed the battery light on the valve was still blinking green. It's still active," Dallas continued, turning to Victoria. "Your high-tech hackers are looking for a complex digital signature in the sky. You're looking in the wrong place. You need to tap into the Illinois Department of Transportation's analog tollway receivers." Victoria's eyes widened in sudden realization. She slammed her hand down on the nearest desk. "Do it! Now! Patch into the IDOT analog grid. Search for an unauthorized 433 megahertz transmission bouncing off local infrastructure." The room erupted into frantic motion. Keyboards clattered furiously as the analysts pivoted their approach, abandoning their sophisticated satellite sweeps to hack into the outdated municipal infrastructure of the city's highway system. 5 agonizing minutes passed. The clock ticked closer to 9:00 a.m. "I have a ping," a female analyst shouted, jumping out of her chair. "It's faint, but it's there." It registered on an old commercial way station receiver on the industrial south side. The signal didn't stop at I-90. "But the car's on I-90, Reynolds argued. "No," Dallas corrected him, his eyes narrowing. "They didn't just abandon the car. They swapped the tires." Croft's men took the spare off the Porsche to make it look like a standard breakdown, and they tossed the ugly steel donut into the back of their own getaway van so they wouldn't leave evidence of a third party at the scene. They took the tracker with them. "Track that signal," Victoria commanded, her voice ringing with newfound, dangerous authority. A red dot appeared on a digital map of Chicago, blinking slowly as it moved away from the highway. The dot crawled south, weaving through the industrial districts before finally coming to a complete stop near the edge of the Calumet River. "The signal is stationary," the analyst reported. "It's holding at an abandoned shipping shipyard owned by a shell corporation, registered to Omnicorp." Victoria turned to Reynolds. The look in her eyes was no longer that of a terrified mother. It was the ruthless gaze of a billionaire who had just found the people who stole her daughter. "Reynolds," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Take your team, bring my daughter home, and leave no survivors." The Calumet River shipyard was a sprawling, rusted graveyard of Chicago's industrial past. Crumbling brick warehouses stood like decaying teeth against the gray morning sky, surrounded by mountains of rotting shipping containers and the skeletal remains of dismantled cargo freighters. Inside the back of Vanguard's mobile command vehicle, Dallas strapped a Kevlar vest tightly over his grease-stained work shirt. "You don't have to do this, Miller," Reynolds said, loading a fresh magazine into his rifle. "We have the location. My men can handle the extraction." "You need me," Dallas replied, his voice hard as he grabbed a heavy steel pry bar from the vehicle's emergency kit. "That shipyard shut down in 2012. I used to do diesel maintenance on the gantry cranes there. It's a maze of blind spots, unstable catwalks, and flooded dry docks. If your men go charging in blind, Croft's mercenaries will funnel you into a kill zone before you even see the Faraday van." Victoria Sterling, monitoring the drone feeds from a tactical console, nodded curtly. "He's right, Reynolds. Listen to him. Bring my daughter back." The armored convoy rolled to a silent halt a quarter-mile from the shipyard's perimeter. The extraction team, dressed in urban camouflage, moved like ghosts through the morning mist rolling off the river. Dallas took the lead, guiding them through a rusted-out storm drain that completely bypassed the heavily guarded main gates. They emerged into the shadows of a towering, dilapidated dry dock. The air smelled of stagnant water, decaying algae, and the sharp metallic tang of oxidized iron. "There," Dallas whispered, pointing toward a massive, corrugated steel warehouse at the edge of the water. Parked inside the gutted structure was a heavy-duty, matte black transit van, the Faraday Cage. Thick, black cables snaked out from the van's rear doors, connecting to a loud, diesel-powered industrial generator humming violently near the warehouse entrance. Surrounding the van were a dozen heavily armed mercenaries. But Dallas's eyes were drawn to the man standing in the center of the chaos. Jonathan Croft looked entirely out of place in the grimy warehouse. He wore a bespoke charcoal gray Tom Ford suit, an expensive camel hair overcoat draped over his shoulders. He was holding a satellite phone to his ear, his face twisted in a mask of arrogant fury. "He's bypassing the Faraday shielding with a hardline uplink," Reynolds muttered, looking through the optical scope of his rifle. "That generator is powering a localized satellite transmitter. He's forcing Victoria's system to accept the Vanguard source code transfer right now. If that upload finishes, he'll order his men to execute the girl." "We can't just shoot up the van," Dallas said, his mechanical mind racing. "It's armored. By the time you breach those doors, the upload will be done, and Chloe will be caught in the crossfire." "Then we cut the head off the snake," Reynolds said, signaling his men to fan out. "We take out Croft and secure the perimeter." "Wait." Dallas grabbed Reynolds' shoulder. "Look at the generator. It's a heavy-duty Caterpillar unit. It requires a constant flow of liquid coolant to operate at that output. If I can get to the primary intake valve and bleed the pressure, the thermal safeties will trip, the generator will seize, and the power to the satellite uplink will be instantly severed. The upload will crash." Reynolds stared at him. Can you reach it without being seen? Dallas looked at the labyrinth of rusted pipes and conveyor belts running along the ceiling of the warehouse. I'm a mechanic. Getting under the hood is what I do. You have 2 minutes, Reynolds said, his eyes cold. Once that generator dies, we breach. Dallas slipped away into the shadows. He climbed a rusted ladder on the exterior of the building, his muscles burning from exhaustion. He crept along the precarious groaning catwalk suspended 30 feet above the warehouse floor. Below him, Croft was screaming into his phone. I don't care about Victoria's demands, Croft yelled, checking a digital tablet in his hand. The decryption algorithm is at 94%. The moment we hit 100, put a bullet in the teenager and burn the van. Dallas's blood ran cold. He shimmied down a structural support beam, dropping silently behind a stack of wooden shipping pallets, just 10 feet from the roaring Caterpillar generator. A mercenary, armed with a tactical shotgun, was pacing just on the other side of the machine. Dallas timed his movements to the heavy thrum of the diesel engine. He crawled to the exposed side of the generator. He recognized the layout instantly. He found the pressurized coolant line, a thick, braided steel hose. He couldn't just cut it. The pressure would blow back and alert the guard. He pulled a heavy crescent wrench from his back pocket. He clamped it onto the main bleed valve and twisted hard. The rusted bolt groaned in protest before finally giving way. A stream of bright green coolant began to pool silently onto the concrete floor, draining the machine's lifeblood. Upload at 97%, Croft shouted. Dallas watched the temperature gauge on the generator's control panel spike into the red zone. The engine pitch changed, whining in a high, strained mechanical agony. Hey, the mercenary shouted, noticing the massive puddle of coolant expanding around his boots. He raised his shotgun, looking around frantically. Clank, 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 the engine block seized. With a violent, metallic shriek, the generator chewed its own pistons to pieces and died in a plume of thick, black smoke. The heavy cables connected to the Faraday van instantly sparked and went dark. The satellite uplink dish whirred down to a halt. No! Croft screamed, staring at his tablet as the screen flashed connection lost. Now! Reynolds' voice boomed over the tactical radio. The warehouse windows exploded inward as tear gas canisters rained down from the catwalks. Reynolds and his men breached from all sides in a flawlessly executed tactical strike. The air was ripped apart by the deafening roar of suppressed gunfire. Dallas didn't wait to watch the firefight. As the mercenaries returned fire blindly through the thick smoke, Dallas sprinted directly toward the rear of the armored van. He jammed his steel pry bar into the seam of the heavy rear doors, throwing his entire body weight into the lever. The locking mechanism snapped. Dallas ripped the doors open. Chloe was huddled in the corner of the dark, windowless interior, her hands zip-tied in front of her, her eyes wide with absolute terror. Chloe! Dallas yelled, dropping the pry bar. She looked up, blinking through the tear gas drifting into the van. When she recognized the grease-stained face of the mechanic who had fixed her tire the night before, she let out a shattered sob of relief. You came back, she cried, as Dallas used a pocket knife to slice through her zip ties. I told you I'd make sure you were safe, Dallas said gently, pulling her out of the van and shielding her with his body. Outside, the gunfire ceased. The smoke began to clear. Reynolds' men had neutralized the mercenaries. Jonathan Croft was pinned to the concrete, his expensive suit ruined, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back as Reynolds stood over him with a cold, victorious glare. It was over. 2 weeks later, the morning sun shone brightly over the affluent suburbs of northern Chicago. The air was crisp, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the neighborhood. Dallas stood on the driveway of a beautiful, sprawling, 4-bedroom house. It had a white picket fence, a massive backyard, and, most importantly, a state-of-the-art 3-car garage equipped with hydraulic lifts and brand-new snap-on tool chests. Emily was running around the front lawn, laughing as she chased a golden retriever puppy, a welcoming gift that had been waiting for them inside. A sleek, silver Maybach pulled up to the curb. The rear door opened, and Victoria Sterling stepped out. She looked entirely different from the terrified mother in the war room. She was wearing a sharp, tailored business suit, projecting the aura of a woman who had just successfully dismantled a rival empire. Chloe stepped out behind her, looking healthy, smiling brightly as she waved at Emily. Victoria walked up the driveway, looking at the house. "Is it to your liking, Mr. Miller?" "It's too much, Miss Sterling," Dallas said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept a multi-million-dollar house. I'm just a mechanic. I earn my keep." "Dallas," Victoria said softly, dropping the formal CEO persona, "Jonathan Croft is currently sitting in a federal black site, facing a lifetime of espionage and kidnapping charges. Vanguard Global is secure. But more importantly, my daughter is alive. You didn't just fix a tire. You protected a frightened girl when she had nowhere else to go. And your resourcefulness defeated a billionaire's mercenary army. You earned this." She reached into her designer jacket and pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio, handing it to him. "I know you don't want charity," Victoria continued with a wry smile. "So consider this a business transaction. Inside that folder is the deed to this property, fully paid off, and there is a contract for a new position. I am restructuring Vanguard's global logistics and physical security fleet. I need a director of motor pool operations, someone who understands that sometimes a rusty analog valve beats a trillion-dollar satellite." Dallas opened the portfolio. The salary listed on the contract was more money than he could make in 10 lifetimes, turning wrenches in his old shop. He looked up at Victoria, then over to his daughter, who was giggling happily on the pristine green lawn, completely safe. He closed the folder and extended his hand. "When do I start?" Dallas asked. Victoria shook his hand firmly. "Take the weekend off, Director Miller. We have a lot of work to do on Monday." Did this high-stakes story of a single father's bravery keep you on the edge of your seat? Hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling, real-life inspired dramas. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and drop a comment below on what you would have done in Dallas's shoes. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload.